there, I'm up again. Today we'll be looking at blue-red fairies. So my intention is to run a league with this deck. I'll need to think about it a bit. I'm not yet 100% sure this is the correct 75, but I'm kind of happy with the result. So I'm going to start showing you a bit what's this deck about. This is amazing, and the format has been one of the decks that's been around forever. So it's a deck that's mostly well known. So the idea of the deck is to play a couple of fairies. Mostly the reason for that is a Spell Starter Sprite, which is a very, very powerful card, which is a 1/1 flash flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, counters a spell with CMC X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. So by itself, this can counter like a cantrip or a removal spell just on its own. So just the mere thought of you having one of these cards is something that can stop the opponent from playing 1-drops if they don't have anything. Importantly, this is a counterspell that dies to removal, so you need to kind of work for you in order to get the 2-for-1, but it's mostly a great card. So the idea of this deck is to maximize the power of Spell Starter Sprite by a few different ways. First of all, you have Fairy Seer as a cheap way of having another fairy. So having additional fairies, it makes your Spell Starter Sprite much better, mostly because if your opponent goes for a 1-drop and you think that maybe they have a removal spell, you can still play your Spell Starter Sprite, and even if they kill the Spell Starter Sprite, you counter their 1-drop. So it's important to have more fairies for that reason. So this helps enable Spell Starter Sprite. Other card that's very good with Spell Starter Sprite is Ninja of the Deep Powers. So you can ninjutsu with Ninja and return the Spell Starter to your hand, basically drawing a counter spell and another card. So the upside is very, very high. So I'm not going to go through the core of the deck anymore. I think you get the idea. You play some creatures. We aren't playing right now any Delvers, because my take on this deck and the way I play it is as a control deck that has these creatures, right, as value creatures and not as an aggressive deck. So if you play Delver of Secrets, though it has a bit of an upside where you can pressure Tron, for example, so they don't go over the top. So if you pressure them with an early Delver, you're going to win. So basically, Delver is for the linear matchups, right? When having, for example, card advantage over your opponent isn't as important, and it's more important in putting a very high clock. So I don't know if this is a right meta call. So my meta call here is that the games are going to go long, and I don't want to have a useless creature that doesn't give any value, and I prefer to have Fairy Seers and more card draw and more counter spells, basically. So one important addition to the deck from Double Masters is Abrade. Abrade is an exceptional card that it's an instant speed, so that's very, very good for us. It's 2 CMC, which is the top of our curve, and it does either 3 damage to a creature or destroys an artifact. So in my head, this is better than the third bolt, because what this does is that it can work as a bolt when you need it to, and it can remove a Bonders Ornament when you need to. I was thinking even going to 2 of this effect, but I wanted to have also Fire Eyes, and having a lot of 2 CMC removal spells doesn't seem so great. So I opted to have 1 Abrade, 1 Fire Eyes, and 6 bolts, basically. Then the additional part that's a missing piece, this deck used to run like 3 Gash. Of course, Gash is banned. Then after the ban from Gash, not shortly thereafter, the Mystic Sanctuary took over the format, and I went for that route. I played like 2 or 3 Mystic Sanctuary plus Tragic Lesson, and that worked pretty well. But right now we don't have that anymore because that was banned again. So yeah, we have to make do with something else. So right now I'm testing Frantic Inventory. So this is very powerful in the sense that it can draw a lot of cards if you draw them early on. But the problem is that it's soft to graveyard hate. And even though this is the only piece of graveyard utility that we have in this deck, in the past we used to have the Mystic Sanctuary, so people just bring graveyard hate to you versus you because they need to break from the deprived block. So right now without the Mystic Sanctuary, they shouldn't be bringing in graveyard hate against us. So that makes Frantic Inventory a bit better in my opinion. Other considerations are cards like Think Twice. Let me show you. So Think Twice is good just because it's less reliant on your graveyard. The amount of cards in total that you draw with Frantic Inventory are higher than with Think Twice because it's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, but that's if it's not interrupted. This only draws always 8 cards if you have 4 copies of Think Twice. Additionally, you don't need to play 4 copies of Think Twice, and this card is very, very good when you have a very flash kind of archetype, and we do have a flash archetype. If you separate the cards that aren't flash, you have like all of these. These are the sorcery speed things, and these are the instant speed things. So it's most of it, it's flash instant speed. So you can even remove some fairies here for fairy duelist and have a way more flash kind of archetype, and that works very good. Yeah, so that works better with Think Twice. You always have things to do in the end of opponent's turn, which is very important. When you play the deck, there are a lot of times where you hold counterspell and your opponent doesn't play anything that you want to counterspell, so you just waste the mana. This helps a lot with that. So I would play probably 1 or 2 Think Twice plus other ways of drawing cards. Another card would be Reign of Revelation. So Reign of Revelation is a great source of card advantage, but it has the problem that has the problem that's 4 mana. But drawing 3 and discarding 1 is going to always be great. That's one of the options that I have running around. Another option could be something like Wings, I think it's called, something like that. No. Flying. So I don't remember right now the name of the card. So let me search. Wing Wars. This was. So this is basically a 2 mana draw 2, but sorcery. So I don't want to play this. Basically, the other card that could be played is Of One Mind. This I thought very hard about putting it, but the problem is that you need basically to first play Delver of Secrets, which I don't want to. Secondly, you want your creatures to survive, and your Ninja of the Deep Hours and Delver of Secrets are just are asking to be bolted, right? So this plan could be better in a more linear deck where you kind of have the certainty that your creatures are going to survive, and then Of One Mind can go really crazy, drawing a lot of cards for very cheap. So I could see that in a more linear metagame. The last card I wanted to talk about is Tragic Lesson. So Tragic Lesson is okay right now. I don't think it's worth it, especially if you don't have any graveyard kind of utility. But drawing 2 and bouncing a land can be like 2 CMC divination if you still have to make your land drop. So you play like, suppose you have like 3 lands on play, and it's turn 4, you can just tap 3, return 1 island, play it again, and play like a Fairy Seer. So basically you make a very good use of your mana that way with Tragic Lesson. And it's instant speed, which is very, very important for this deck, but I think still that's not that great. Mostly because we can't use the discard right now. Maybe if you build something that uses the graveyard and thus the discard part is worth it, then it can be worth it, because it's way more. It can do a couple of different jobs, right, for you. So I think that's one of the considerations. And I think that's it. Also, Una's Grace, maybe. Again, Una's Grace is great if you are a flash deck that doesn't really need their lands. in this deck we do use our lands, even though it looks like all of our spells cost 2 or less. Mostly because we cast a lot of cantrips and we hold counter spells, so we use a lot of mana every turn. So Una's Grace, I don't think is the way to go here. Yeah, those are the draw cards I was thinking about. So right now I think the correct place to go for Frantic Inventories and see the meta, how it develops. If it has a lot of graveyard hate, then I think twice and maybe 1 or 2 Reign of Revelation as a way of just going over the top with card advantage is the way to go. Again, I'm not 100% sure of the build because this depends on the metagame, and it's very hard to have a good idea, good grasp of the metagame if I don't play some leagues. So I'm going to start playing some leagues with this deck and kind of work from there. But I wanted to go through each of the different decisions I made with this deck. The other card that you may be wondering what the hell it's doing there is Miscalculation. So this is it's similar to Fire and Ice in the sense that it's a removal spell that cycles. Fire Ice, right? You can either kill a creature or you can draw a card. So that's a very powerful effect. It's not the most efficient of the removal spells. Like Fire Part is okay. When it's good, it's amazing. When it's bad, it's kind of you prefer a Bolt. The worst case scenario is you are against a Thermal Alchemist that you can do anything with the Fire Part. The other card is Miscalculation, and this card is 2 mana for counter unless they pay 2, which isn't great, but when you are the aggro, and this deck can sometimes be the aggro, this card is better because you are pressuring them and thus they have to tap out very aggressively to deal with your creatures. So in that case it's very good. And when you are not the aggressive deck and you are the controlish deck, an additional counter spell that's situational but you can cycle away is very good. If you are needing a removal spell, you can always cycle it to find a removal spell, so that makes it worth it in my opinion. Other things that you could be playing in these flex slots are removal spells that can kill, like for example a Gurmag Angler. Right now we have 4 Screds, but maybe that's your main concern. You can change one of these for Harvest Fire. So Harvest Fire, in the past I used to run this card in the times where Ubi Delver was the most important deck. So this is additional Scred basically. Other cards that you could be playing is like maybe changing and removing Augur of Bolas and going for a main deck Sudden Sandstorm deck. Or even, I was thinking even of running Goblin Wizardry here because we are a flash deck in some respects, and thus additional threats that are instant speed is very good. So one way you could be building this deck is removing the Augur of Bolas, maybe going down in Ninjas, removing the Fairy Seers, going up with Fairy Duelist and Goblin Wizardry and going from there. I think that I wanted to test this before going to something more crazy, right? Then the additional kind of flex slots is maybe 1 island. Right now I think 19 is kind of okay, but I wanted to not mulligan a lot because we don't have that much card advantage as we had in the past. And maybe changing the cantrips around. I like 1 Brainstorm for when it's good, but Ponders are very great to flipping your Augur of Bolas. Brainstorm kind of does the same job. You also have Fairy Seer to clearing up the Brainstorm, so there are a couple of good things rolling around for Brainstorm. So yeah, that's basically it. You could be running like, instead of Miscalculation, Deprive, instead of some amount of creatures, for example 1 less Fairy Seer, and put like Exclude. That's another way of going around it. So it depends mostly how do you want to play your deck. If it's more of a proactive deck or a reactive deck, I wanted to go for a more streamlined, cheap cards kind of tempo deck. So that's the way I'm building it. In the sideboard, I went for 2 Sudden Sandstorm for aggro, 1 extra Braid. Braid is, I think it's very good in the sideboard actually, because there was a couple of times where in a couple of metas where I went for a removal spell on the sideboard, And I think it has some good applications. For example, again, against aggro, you kind of don't want your counter spells. So anything that can deal with proactively with the creatures on board instead of waiting for them to cast them can be very good. And this also deals with artifacts. So this can bring in, you can bring this in against Bondar's ornaments if that's what you're worried, or other problematic artifacts, even against affinity. This works very well because you can deal with small creatures or with the mirror enforcers, or just kind of cheese them out by denying them a land. Yeah, so it works as additional gorilla shamans. So with this we have like in total 3 ways of dealing with artifacts. Gorilla shaman is just to cheese wins out from affinity and sometimes Boros Monarch. Then we have Pyroblast for the blue decks. Electricities, I need 2 because I only have 1 Fire Ice. If I have 2 Fire Ice, I normally go for 1 Electricity. Again, we want to not fall so much behind against elves and such. Stormgeist against the mirror and the black decks and decks where you need extra threats. Stormgeist is a very a very resilient threat in the sense that it can deal with 2 removal spells from your opponent, and that way you can kind of grind them out of resources. Echo in Truth is a catch-all. If another thing I forgot to mention is that you can be playing Merchant Scroll here. I wrote that completely wrong. Merchant Scroll. Merchant Scroll is an amazing card. It's a bit clunky and it's sorcery speed, but this can do a lot of things. First off, it can find your Fire Ice. So in the previous build, I had like 1 Merchant Scroll to find the Fire Ice, to find the additional Frantic Inventories, Brainstorm sometimes, and also Icon Truth in the main. I kind of remove it for 1 miscalculation. This can be kind of interchangeable, but I prefer to have additional interaction because we don't have anymore the Mystic Sanctuary lock anymore, so we need extra counter spells. But it's something that you can be doing too in this deck. So the problem with this deck actually is that it has so many things it could be doing, so finding the correct configuration is very difficult. But yeah, basically that's the thing. So then Hydroblast against Affinity, and it works also very well with Boros Monarch, Boros Bully, and of course Burn. Curfew against the Goat Hall decks. Mostly there are a couple. White Heroic and Boggles. So this way you can deal with their creatures with Electricity and then Curfew the last big creature, so you remove all the auras that it's enchanting. Additionally, this can be very good in some matchups where your removal is dead. You can just use this as a way of returning your spell status by countering something else, or bouncing your creature in response to removal. So it's a very useful card. Again, I was considering you can consider to even main deck this if you have a Merchant Scroll, because it's situationally very powerful. Even if you are not main decking it, if you have Merchant Scroll in your deck, then having a Curfew in your sideboard is very strong. So that's mostly it. I don't know if I'm going to be playing today the leagues. I wanted to start playing leagues and see how it works, but this deck is very grindy, so the games take a long time, so probably I won't do the whole league in one go. But yeah, that's more or less my idea. So thank you so much for watching, and so do the games.